necessary, we'll discuss it. Okay, so I start. We see then that there are three terms of the one existence. Now, we see then, note the word then. So, is a sort of conclusion of whatever he has said earlier. Okay, that's the implication. We see then that there are three terms of the one existence. And what are they? Transcendent, universal, and individual. Yesterday we had a discussion on this, and I will give you other words for transcendent, universal, and individual. And another person in the ashram, it seems, who is supposed to be knowledgeable, did not agree with this. Okay, but I'll give you, and I think they do matter. Okay, so transcendent is the one that is the absolute supreme, beyond the universe. Okay, that's it. You can say it is a supramental. The universal is the Brahman consciousness, which is there in the universe. It is there everywhere. So it is widespread. It is universal. But in the individual, it becomes limited and becomes lodged in every single individual being, whether it be a stone or whether it be a human being or an insect. The divine presence is there. Divine presence is there in a condensed individual manner. In the universe, it is there widespread. It is there everywhere. So that's the difference between the individual and the universal. In the individual, the divine has sort of limited himself into a small, concentrated form and lives in each individual thing. Universal, he is widespread. Okay. That's the theory of what they call. There is a philosophy with that. Okay, so I'll get the word later. All these words are escaping me. Okay, so then there's the transcendental. So you can say, if you want to refer to the Gita, okay, the individual is a Kshara Purusha. Kshara, that which is mutable, which is going on changing. Okay. Then when you come to the universal, it becomes the Akshara Purusha, the immutable. When your consciousness rises into the second level, okay, and I keep saying also level 1, level 2, level 3, you can also relate to that. Level 1, at the lowest level, individual. You are seeing the multiplicity and you are in ignorance. You see the multiplicity and think it to be real. That's not absolutely true, but it is true at that level. Okay. Then when your consciousness comes out of the body-mind life and becomes stationed in the Brahman consciousness or the self, which is the same thing, okay, or the Atman consciousness, you feel yourself to be beyond the individual. You are no more individual. You become universal. You don't know, you are there everywhere. But there is someone who is experiencing that. That's a true individual. Then the third level, transcendent, beyond the universe, and there all the problems of the individual level and the universal level get solved. Okay, so these are level 1, level 2, level 3. You can also use different words: the gross world, the subtle world, and the causal world. The supramental is the causal world. So if you want the Gitas, okay, the lowest individual is a Kshara Purusha. The universal is the Akshara Purusha. And the highest is the Uttama Purusha, the highest Purusha. And it says very clearly in the Gita, the Uttara Purusha to Anya, okay, and also the Para Prakriti also. Para Prakriti also is Anya, it is not Prakriti, it becomes conscious. So, 3 levels, so I'm just talking about, and at each level, the duality takes on a different attitude. Okay, so we can start from the individual level. You are in a consciousness where you see the multiplicity and you think it is real. Then you go to the universal, then there you experience the from in the universal, there are 2 or 3 types of dualities that you experience. The first duality is when you feel yourself to be outside the universe, you see yourself as the vast impersonal self. The self is the immutable existence. And you see the universe as Maya. You see it as unreal. But there is the other aspect also, slightly higher if you go, you see yourself as a person who is conscious, Purusha. And then the world becomes not illusion, but Prakriti, mechanical energy. That's the second experience of the duality. And the third experience of the duality, which is in the transcendent, is you become the Ishvara, the master of existence, and the Shakti which you were seeing first as illusion, then as mechanical energy, now becomes a divine Shakti. So this is the gradation. Okay. So that's what is summarizing. We see then that there are three terms of one existence: transcendent, universal, and individual. One existence is dividing itself into three. Exactly like we keep on saying, water, water vapor, and ice. Ice at the bottom, water at the middle level, and water vapor at the highest level, subtle. So, and that each of these always contains secretly or overtly the other two, the two others. Okay, the universal is there both above and below. The transcendent is there also in the two below. The individual also in himself contains the universe as well as this transcendent. And that is the reason why you can become the transcendent and you can also become the universal. I go to the next sentence. The transcendent possesses itself always and controls the other two as the basis of its own temporal possibilities. So let's understand what it means. The transcendent possesses itself. When you possess something, you are mastered. Sri constantly uses the word possess in this sense. The transcendent, you are the master. Okay? You are not subject to Prakriti. At the individual level and the cosmic level, you are subject to Prakriti. You are subject to the force. But here, in the third level, you are the master and you possess the Prakriti. The transcendent possesses itself, completely in control of itself, always, and controls the other two as the basis of its own temporal possibilities. What are the temporal possibilities? Body, mind, life, or universally, matter, life plane, and mind plane. Okay? Controls the other two as the basis of its own temporal possibilities. Temporal possibilities are always in the physical world because the possibilities, when it is not temporal, is like a plan. It's a seed form in the mind of the divine. Okay? That is the divine, the eternal, all possessing God consciousness, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, which informs, embraces, governs all existences. Now, look at the words, each one, and see what it means. That is the divine. Which one? The transcendent. You can call it divine or you can call it God. Okay. The eternal, he is always existing. It's not that he came into existence at one time. All possessing. He possesses all the three levels. God consciousness. And what are his characteristics? Omnipotent. Supremely powerful. Omniscient. He knows everything. Omnipresent. He is there everywhere. In the transcendent, in the cosmic, as well as the individual. Which informs, going into the form. Okay. So I'm going to use the word inform in this sense. Going into the form, indwelling, not like information, okay, like a newspaper. It's not that. So I'm going to use the word informs is always like this, that you enter into the form and live there in a hidden way, but that hidden God consciousness can also become explicit. It can come out. And it embraces, that means it is there at the universal level. Okay. Informs, level 1. In each form it is there. Embraces. When you embrace, you include everything in it. So that's it. Level 2, the cosmic. Governs all existence. You see, from the head office, you control all the things which are lower. So that's the highest level. Okay. That's why some of those words you have to interpret in the right way. Okay. So, informs, embraces, and governs as a reflection in the three terms. Okay. You can see the reflection. Okay. So, the human being is here on earth, the highest power of the third term. The human being, man, is here on earth, the highest power of the third term. The third term is the lowest one. Okay. The body, mind, life. The body, mind, life. So, in the body, mind, life, there are beings which are below him, but nothing above him as yet. Okay. The human being is here on earth, The animal is lower to him, the insect is lower to him, okay? Even matter is lower to him. He is the highest power of the third term. Okay, then when is it gone? The third term. The individual, for he alone can work out at its critical turning point that movement of self-manifestation which appears to us as the involution and evolution of the divine consciousness between the two terms of the ignorance and the knowledge. The ignorance is at level 1, knowledge is at level 3, but knowledge starts coming also at level 2. So what is Sri saying here? He is saying the appearance of man in the evolution is a critical turning point. Why? Because he says in other places that before that, matter produces living forms, but unicellular creatures, small creatures, microbes, viruses, it also creates insects. But all this, there is no trace of yoga or no trace of the urge to evolve further is not there. Not even in the animal. There can be, but yoga is not possible in the animal. When it comes to man, he realizes his own limitations and therefore he has an aspiration for crossing his limitations. That's the critical turning point. Now the evolution can go much faster because nature has created man for her own progress. Okay, that's what he's saying. But he alone can work out the critical turning point, that movement of self-manifestation, which appears to us as the involution and evolution of the divine consciousness between the two terms of the ignorance and the knowledge. In other words, if you take the highest point as the spirit and the lowest point as matter, there is a gradation between the two. And man, who is in the center, okay, now he can reach the higher by his own effort. The lower, even there is no effort also, even if there is an effort, it can't go to the higher. Man upwards, he can go to the higher level of consciousness. That's what Sridhar is saying. Just 1 second, I've lost the page. I will come back. Yeah. So I go to the next sentence. The power of the individual to possess in his consciousness by self-knowledge his unity with the transcendent and the universal, with the one being and all beings, the one being transcendent, all beings cosmic, and to live in that knowledge and transform his life by it is that which makes the working out of the divine self-manifestation through the individual possible. Because man is there, now the divine manifestation can start revealing itself more rapidly and also more effectively. And the arrival of the individual, not in one but in all, at the divine life is the sole conceivable object of this movement. So Sandra is saying that everybody has a chance to become divine, but it won't happen all at one time. It will happen in a group first. So it's not the individual escaping, but even the collectivity has to progress. This is an idea which he goes on repeating in other places. It has been largely absent in Indian culture, let alone other cultures. Okay. But Indian culture, which is already so spiritual, the idea that collectivity has to go to the next level of consciousness has not been spelt out very clearly. Idea in seed form was there. Even in the Vedas, even in the Gita, there is a hint that there can be a higher level of consciousness because they speak of the Purushottama. But the bringing down of that consciousness down here, that is something very, very Sri Aurobindonian. So I am reading the next. The existence of the individual is not an error in some self of the absolute, which that self afterwards discovers. He is saying this because there are many others who say that the creation of the physical world with all its errors and all its imperfection and all its perversion, ignorance, dirt, falsehood, okay, all these things, it's a mistake. How can it have anything to do with the divine? It's a mistake. Okay, it's a dream. It's a madhouse. The madhouse also repeats many other places because some of the Westerners say that they experience self, which is so wonderful, and they feel that the lower is not God created. It is something very, very imperfect, and we should all escape from that. Who wants to remain in a madhouse? Nobody. So that is why he is saying this. The existence of the individual is not an error in some self of the absolute, which that self afterwards discovers. You discover that there is a purpose in the limitations of the physical world. And what is that purpose? Just not to keep you in suspense, but the purpose is it's a challenge, it's an adventure. You go into the lowest and climb out of it, it's an adventure. Okay? Like man always has adventures. He always takes up a challenge and executes it, however difficult it be. Okay? So many examples are there in the physical world. Conquest of Mount Everest, going to the moon, all these things are the very, very clear indications of that. I go to the next sentence. I'll reread this one. The existence of the individual is not an error in some self. I'm saying this because you may wonder, why is he saying error? We all know that he's saying there's a purpose in the physical world. But there are many who don't agree with that. That's why he's making it a point to mention it. Okay? The existence of the individual is an error. Even in the Indian idea, the physical world is imperfect permanently. So you get out of it. But they're saying, no, it is not permanently defective. There is a purpose to it, and the purpose is evolution. Okay? That's what he's saying. In some self of the absolute, which that self afterwards discovers. Man himself will discover that there is no error and permanent imperfection in the physical world. He will discover that at a later stage. For it is impossible that the absolute self-awareness or anything that is one with it should be ignorant of its own truth and its own capacity and betrayed by that ignorance either into a false idea of itself which it has to correct or an impracticable venture which it has to renounce. The ascetic is renouncing, saying impossible to. The Buddhist also is renouncing and saying impossible to change the nature in the physical world. Get out of it. Okay. It is something that needs to be avoided. Swami is contradicting that. Neither is the individual existence a subordinate circumstance in a divine play or leela. Okay. It is not a subordinate circumstance. It is not something inferior. That's what he's saying. Okay. There are many who say that. They say the physical world may be the divine is there. Okay. Like Shankara, he agrees that the divine is there everywhere because he accepts the Upanishadic statement which says Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. Okay. But it is not level 1, it is level 2. It's like a captain and a vice captain. So, but Swami is saying it is not vice captain. It is the captain himself who is hiding himself. That's what he's saying. It's not a secondary thing. That's very clearly, that's the word he's using. Subordinate circumstance. Okay. Even matter is the divine. You are not seeing it. But there is no difference. Spirit and matter are all the same. That's what he's insisting. Neither is the individual existence a subordinate circumstance in a divine play or leela. A play which consists in a continual revolution through unending cycles of pleasure and suffering without any higher hope in the leela itself or any issue from it except the occasional escape of a few from time to time out of their bondage into ignorance. This has been the idea largely, not everywhere, but largely in India, that the world is something that you have to escape from because it is permanently imperfect. Sendra is not, he is challenging that. He is challenging that. Some people may escape, but Sendra is saying it has to be a collective escape. From time to time of their bondage, which is ignorance. We might be compelled to hold that useless and disastrous view of God's workings if man had no power of self-transcendence or no power of transforming by self-knowledge the conditions of the play nearer and nearer to the truth of the divine delight. So Swami is saying we would be justified in saying that yes, the physical world is permanently imperfect and full of undivine things, provided man had no capacity to transcend his own limitations. But Srivastava says man has the capacity to transcend. Therefore, how can it be permanently imperfect? It cannot be. That's what you say. Okay? So, we might be compelled to hold that ruthless and disastrous view of God's workings if man had no power of self-transcendence or no power of transforming by self-knowledge the conditions of the play nearer and nearer to the truth of the divine delight. Now look at that. He's not talking of his own transformation of body, mind, life. He's not talking of that. He's talking of something even more. Look carefully at the words. No power of transforming by self-knowledge the conditions of the play. Okay? It can be individual, body, mind, life, but also it can be changing the conditions in the universe nearer and nearer to the truth of the divine will. He is accepting that it is nearer and nearer. Very slow evolutionary process, but it is going towards divine delight. Okay? Imperfection of the physical world is not permanent. In that power, in man's power to transcend the limitations, lies the justification of individual existence. So now he is saying the individual existence is not a curse. It is not a madhouse. Because in the individual, that's what is now this sentence, you have to connect with the lower upper sentence. Okay? In that power to transcend himself, lies the justification of individual existence. The individual and universal unfolding in themselves, the divine light, power, joy of transcendence, Satchidananda, always manifest above them, always secret behind their surface appearances. This is the hidden intention, the ultimate significance of the divine play, the Leela. It may appear to be absolutely imperfect, but in the imperfection is hidden the possibility of the perfection. This is the hidden intention, that's the adventure. The ultimate significance of the divine play, the Leela. But he is talking of justification, because when you go to level 2, you find no justification at all for all this suffering and pain and imperfection. Okay? You don't find any. But since they saying go one step more and you will see that it is justified. Now you will understand why there is a limitation. So, actually also, it's very interesting what he's saying here, because it explains the existentialist theory. The existentialist theory is, yes, it is true that there is imperfection in the physical world, but all you can do is to accept it and try your best. But that is the nature of the physical world. What can we do? They have no conception that God is there and there can be a higher level of consciousness to which you can rise. Okay? That is what he is pointing out. So the existentialist theory is exactly that. That you have no power. They're saying, sorry, you have a power. Man has the power to transcend. So therefore he cancels the existentialist theory. Okay? So, now I come to the next sentence. But it is in themselves, in their transformation, but also their persistence and perfect relations, not in their self-annihilation, that must be unfolded. Don't do like the ascetic who escapes and rejects his body, mind, life and goes out. Okay. The intention of the divine will not be revealed to the ascetic, but the intention of the divine will be revealed to one who is living in the physical world and perfecting himself. That's what Sri is saying. Persistence. Don't go away out of impatience, but persist in the transformation of the lower, and not in the self-annihilation. Self-annihilation is the one that the ascetic is resorting to. That must be unfolded. What must that 2 times he is using? It is the annihilation that the hidden intention must be unfolded. Otherwise, there would be no reason for there ever having existed. The possibility of the divine's unfolding in the individual is the secret to the enigma. His presence there and his intention of self-unfolding are the key to the world of knowledge, ignorance. The universe is the field of knowledge, ignorance, and the Those who say that there is absolutely no chance of any, you have to accept the conditions of the physical world. So I'm saying no, it's not like that. It's a very slow process, I admit, but there is a possibility of a change. And we can already see that change in the first two steps of the evolution. That completes the chapter, the eternal and the individual. Now, the eternal and the individual. The eternal is perfect and the individual seems to be in the imperfect. So, what is divine and undivine? That's the next chapter. And we have got plenty of time, so we can start reading. This is a very, very interesting way. How do you define the individual and the divine? There are many philosophies which say the divine is only on top and the undivine is below, and the undivine has to be cancelled and you have to rise to the divine. But Sridhar is saying the divine and the undivine are relative terms. Okay? At the lowest level, things seem to be undivine, but the divine is hiding in the undivine and he has to be disclosed, he has to be discovered. And as you keep rising in consciousness, that discovery becomes more and more possible and also more and more faster. That's what we'll say. So, shall we read? The divine and the undivine.
Rangada, can I ask a question before the new chapter begins?
Go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned that the three terms of existence to the Gita's three Purusha. So
Yeah.
can you say the psychic being of Sri Aurobindo is belongs to the Kushara Purusha in the Gita?
The psychic being is in the individual soul. So it's at level 1, it is hiding. Suki, I didn't exactly get the question. You are saying that the psychic being can be equated with what? The Uttama Purusha.
Kushara Purusha. Not Akshara Purusha, Kushara Purusha. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, Shara Purusha. That's right, you are right. Because psychic being also evolves. It is not static like the self. In level 2, your self is static. Okay? It is permanently what it is. There is no evolution there. Okay? But in the psychic being is evolving because it is hidden itself and it has to discover itself. So the psychic being grows. Okay? It's not the psychic being that grows, it is the soul that grows. And the soul you can define as a divine presence in everything, the individual divine who has hidden himself and has forgotten what he is. Okay? And he has to slowly evolve. And evolution, okay, in Sri Aurobindo's concept, the evolution is that of consciousness. In the stone, there is a consciousness. It is not the stone that becomes the insect and the insect becomes the cat and dog. No, it is a consciousness that is evolving and migrating from a lower physical form to a slightly higher physical form where consciousness is becoming more and more obvious. So, it is the consciousness that is developing. Okay? So, at the lowest level, it's only the divine presence, but the divine presence is sleeping. It is absolutely hidden. It's very, very tiny. And as soon as there is a chance of a migrating to a slightly better thing, when the universe produces a living creature, the living creature is slightly superior to a stone, obviously, in consciousness. So the divine presence in a stone migrates into the living being, whether it be a unicellular creature or a virus or whatever you want, okay, or a microbe. Then from there, as soon as it gets a chance to migrate to a higher level of consciousness, it migrates. So actually you have been there, your individual soul has been there right from the beginning of the universe. That is the reason why your soul is immortal. You have always been and you will always be. Okay? That's what you realize. You realize your own immortality. The body, mind, life dies, but not the soul. and that soul is slowly evolving. So, Sunki, your question, yes, the psychic being is the divine presence, but it is not the sleeping divine presence. It is the awakened divine presence in a human being. Rarely is there a psychic being in animals. It is not there. But a psychic influence can be there. The psychic influence can be, not the psychic being. I'll tell you a very interesting story. When mother used to experiment a lot with cats, okay, and it's very interesting. There used to be a Pakka South Indian Brahmin, okay, his name was Rajangam. Okay, he was a doctor, okay, and he was a South Indian Brahmin, a perfect vegetarian. And you know what was the work given to him? To go and buy fish and boil the fish and feed the cats. Why is mother doing that? Because she wants him to get rid of his limitations and his concepts. Non-vegetarian is not good, okay? So get rid of all these fixed notions. So that was the work given to him. And mother used to experiment with these cats. So one day, Sri Aurobindo in his evening talks is mentioning, okay, he's mentioning to the sadhaks that there are so many cats, and there was one fellow. One fellow was called Kitty, okay, another was called Big Boy, okay, he was a male. And so Sri Aurobindo is saying, this cat has got many relations with the other cats, the female cats. In one case, his relation with one is absolutely physical, okay? And in the other case, it is vital. And the third case, his relation with the third cat is absolutely psychic. Okay, so it's a psychic influence that can be there, but not the psychic being. Psychic being is there only in the human being. Okay, so Sunki's question that the psychic being in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, it's there in other philosophies also. The psychic being is the divine presence which has awakened. It's not sleeping anymore. That's the thing. Okay.
Rangada,
Yeah, tell me. Tell me.
can we say the psychic being is that Angushta Purusha which is there in the individual?
Yes, it is. But it is awakened.
Okay.
And it has the possibility of joining the self at the second level. The psychic being continues to remain individual. Okay. In fact, Mother says something very interesting. She says that even the supramental body could be the psychic being which realizes its own individual and divine possibilities and becomes a subtle substance and becomes a divine supramental body. She mentions that because there was an American lady who used to look after the correspondence with Americans. Okay? And she says that when her name was Rijuta, okay? That's the name given by no, mother, because I think she came after Sri Aurobindo passing away. And she saw Rijuta, behind Rijuta, she saw her psychic being larger than the body. Okay? So, and then she said that it could well be that this psychic being is a substance. Okay? That we know, everything is substance. Okay? That you must not forget. You mustn't think that anything is abstract. Everything is subtle, but it is substance. That substance could become the supramental body. She says that. It's very interesting. So, yes, the psychic being is the individual divine, but not anymore in ignorance. It becomes capable of becoming a divine body. Okay? So.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we have time. We have
Thank you,
got
Rangada.
So let's begin the next chapter. The divine and the undivine.
Shall I read?
Yes.
The divine and the undivine, the seer, the thinker, the self-existent who becomes everywhere, has ordered perfectly all things from years, sempiternal. Isha Upanishad. Many purified by knowledge have come to my state of being. They have reached likeness in their law of being to me. Gita. Know that for the Brahman, and not this which men cherish here. Kenya Upanishad. One controlling inner self of all beings. As the sun, the eye of the world, is not touched by the external faults of vision, so this inner self in beings is not touched by the sorrow of the world. Katha Upanishad. The Lord abides in the heart of all beings. Gita. Do I
Let's
keep reading?
then we'll come back.
The universe is a manifestation of an infinite and eternal all existence. The divine being dwells in all that is. We ourselves are that in ourselves, in our own deepest being. Our soul, the secret indwelling psychic entity, is a portion of the divine consciousness and essence. This is the view we have taken of our existence. But at the same time, we speak of a divine life as the culmination of the evolutionary process, and the use of the phrase implies that our present life is undivine, and all the life too that is below us. At the first glance, this looks like a self-contradiction. Instead of making a distinction between the divine life we aspire for and a present undivine existence, it would be more logical to speak of an ascent from level to higher level of a divine manifestation. It may be admitted that essentially, if we look at the inner reality alone and discount the suggestions of the outer figure, such might be the nature of the evolution, the change we have to undergo in nature. So it would appear, perhaps, to the impartial eye of a universal vision, untroubled by our dualities of knowledge and ignorance, good and evil, happiness and suffering, and participating in the untrammeled consciousness and delight of Satchidananda. And yet, from the practical and relative point of view, as distinguished from an essential vision, a distinction between the divine and the undivine has an insistent value, a very pressing significance. This then is an aspect of the problem which it is necessary to bring into the light and assess its true importance.
Okay. Essentially, what he's saying is very clear. He's saying that we are speaking of divine and undivine. Okay, pure is undivine. So, what do we mean by that? Is there really something undivine? Because we have started with the concept of Advaita. The spirit and matter are really one. So, in that case, we have to speak of a gradation of divinity. At the lowest level, there seems to be a lack of divinity. At the highest level, there is full divinity. So it is more logical, he says, to consider that there is a gradation of divinity also. That's what he's saying. And that's exactly what we mean by consciousness. Consciousness sleeping, consciousness awakening, consciousness becoming full. Okay? The three levels. But it's not necessarily three levels. It is an infinite level of levels. Slowly you keep on growing, and from the lowest you go to the highest. Okay? So this is what he's saying. So we still have 6-7 minutes. So I suggest that we look at the quotations that he has given. Okay? Then we'll take up next time, in the next week actually. Okay? First is the Isha Upanishad. Okay? The seer, the thinker, his self-existence. Okay? The Kavi Manishi Swayambhu. These are the words used in the Isha Upanishad. Who becomes everywhere. The self-existent who becomes everywhere. Okay? He is there everywhere. Has ordered perfectly all things from years sempiternal. Right from the beginning. Okay? He himself has created all beings with a perfect plan. That's what the Isha Upanishad says. Okay? Ordered, there's an organized way it is done. There's no disorder. When you look at the physical world, it seems to be disorder, but it is not so. The second one is from the Gita. Man, purified by knowledge, have come to my state of being. They have reached likeness in their law of being to me. This is Sri Krishna speaking, and he says that many people have reached my state of being. Okay? And they have reached the likeness in the law of being to me. By Karma Yoga, they have put on the nature of the divine. Okay? They have given the reference also. The reference to the second one is the 4th chapter, 10th verse. And also it is repeated in the 14th chapter, 2nd verse. Okay, so many purified by knowledge. So, then from the Kena Upanishad, know that for the Brahman and not this which men cherish here. Know that from the Brahman, the highest level, and not this which men cherish here, the physical world and all its desires and all that. Most human beings are plunged into the physical world and they love it. Okay? They enjoy themselves with desire and attachment and ego. That's not what we should do. He's saying, know that for the Brahman and not this physical world. In other words, there is a dichotomy between the two. One controlling inner self of all beings. As a sun, the eye of the world is not touched by the external faults of vision, so this inner self in beings is not touched by the sorrow of the world. Katha Upanishad. By the way, I should mention, it is not Katha. Okay, there are many children who think it is Katha Upanishad. It is not. Katha. Katha is the name of a rishi. So it's a Katha Upanishad. And it's a beautiful Upanishad where the story of Nachiketa comes up. And Nachiketa is a young boy. Okay? He is the son of a king. And the king in India was always looking after the Brahmins and the poor people and giving away his wealth. Whatever wealth is to come to him, he is to give away. So this particular king is giving away, and this is symbolized by he gave away 1,000 cows. Okay? In India, for a long time, in many other civilizations also, cattle is a sign of wealth because the cow gives you everything that the cow has is useful to man. Okay? Look at it. The milk is useful, the curds is useful, the ghee is useful, okay, the butter that comes is useful, even the dead cow, okay, you get leather from it. So that was usually the sign of a wealth. So when you are giving away cows, okay, so you are giving away. So I'll tell you the story next time because now it is 8:35. So we'll stop here today. Okay. Next time we'll take up the. So you can put it on chat. Okay. So the divine and chapter. Which is the chapter? Chapter 4. Yeah. Divine and undivine.